There is a specific type of INFJ who looks at their life and sees only wasted time. 29 and still searching, 35 and starting over, 43 and finally beginning. The world calls this failure, but those who carry the old sight recognize it as something else entirely, the completion of an initiation that their bloodline has been preparing them for across centuries. Welcome to power and myth. You look at your peers and see a timeline that does not match your own. They moved in straight lines, they knew what they wanted at 20, achieved it by 25, and solidified it by 30, and then there is you. Your path has been a spiral. You have started and stopped. You have pursued callings with absolute conviction only to abandon them when the meaning drained away. You have spent years in what appears to be stagnation to the outside world, whilst internally you are fighting wars and dismantling architectures of thought that others do not even know exist. This is not personal failure. This is the exile beginning their journey. The exile is the first archetype that INFJs with deep sight must inhabit, usually throughout their 20s. You are outside the normal timeline, learning to survive alone, because somewhere in your cells lives the memory of what happens when certain gifts reveal themselves too early. Your ancestors who showed their sight at 20 were the ones who did not survive to pass on their wisdom. The healers who advertised their knowledge before they had built protection were the ones who burned. The seers who spoke their visions before they understood how to translate them were the ones who were called mad, exiled, or worse. You delay not because you are broken, but because you carry the inherited caution of a lineage that learned through fire that certain capacities must remain hidden until the holder is strong enough to defend them. Carl Jung, who understood personality through the lens of archetype rather than trait, identified a specific category of individual whose psychological makeup is so intricate and so heavily laden with unconscious material that they are biologically incapable of early superficial success. He would not look at your timeline with concern. He would look at it with recognition, what the world calls being a late bloomer, the ancient mystery traditions called completing an initiation. The druids required 7 years of training before a novice could be trusted with real knowledge. The amount of time you have spent feeling behind is almost exactly the length of a classical initiation cycle. This is not coincidence. This is structure. You cannot simply do something. You must understand the meaning behind the action before you can commit your energy to it. Whilst others were climbing the corporate ladder, you were paralyzed by the need to understand why the ladder existed at all, why it was positioned where it was, and whether it was leaning against the right wall. This need for deep understanding acts as a heavy brake on external progress. In a world that rewards swift, unthinking execution, this makes you appear hesitant, indecisive, and lost. But Jung would argue that this hesitation is actually a safeguard. It is your soul refusing to invest in a life that is not authentic to you. More than that, it is your intuition that remembers what happens when people like you commit too early to paths that will later require them to choose between their gift and their survival. The danger, of course, is that you internalize this slowness as a defect. You look at the gap between your potential and your reality and feel a profound shame that tastes ancient in your mouth. You wonder why you cannot just be normal, why simple tasks drain you, why you require so much solitude to recharge, why you feel a bone-deep exhaustion even when you have not physically done anything. This exhaustion is not laziness. You are processing reality at a resolution that others do not perceive. Every interaction, every shift in the emotional atmosphere of a room, every piece of information is data that your psyche must integrate. You are not just living, you are translating between worlds. And this work is invisible, which means it is never valued, which means you begin to believe it is not real. But here is what most people never understand about the INFJ timeline. You are not failing to launch. You are undergoing the 7-stage initiatory journey that has always been required of those who will eventually wield sight with wisdom rather than recklessness. The exile was only the beginning. By your late 20s and early 30s, If you are paying attention, you begin to inhabit the second archetype, the wounded healer. This is the stage where you process the pain of falling behind. You look at what you have lost, the friendships that dissolved because no one understood why you needed so much space, the careers you abandoned because they suffocated something essential in you, the relationships that ended because you could not pretend to be lighter than you are. The wounded healer does not heal others despite their wounds. They heal others because of them. You spent these years absorbing the pain of being different, of being too much and not enough simultaneously, of feeling like an alien in your own life. And in that absorption, you are learning the grammar of suffering that will later allow you to recognize it in others and offer the specific medicine they need. Jung observed that the wound that will not heal becomes the gift. But this transformation is not automatic. It requires what he called shadow work, the deliberate integration of everything you threw away because you were taught it was dangerous. You spent your 20s being harmless because you inherited the cellular memory of what happens to powerful women who could not defend themselves, to seers who revealed too much too soon, to healers whose knowledge threatened the established order. You were not repressing your power out of neurosis. You were waiting until you had learned to survive with it. The ambition you thought was selfish greed, that is the fuel you will need to build something that lasts. The anger you thought was destructive, that is the boundary-setting energy that will stop others from exploiting your gifts. The desire for recognition you tried to kill, that is your soul's legitimate need to be seen for what you actually are, not what you have been pretending to be. By your mid-30s, if you have done the work of the wounded healer, you enter the territory of the hermit. This is the deep inner work that appears as withdrawal to those watching. You disappear, not physically, necessarily, but energetically. You stop trying to explain yourself. You stop attempting to fit into spaces that were never built for your shape. The hermit goes into the dark alone. Not because they are running away, but because they are seeking something that can only be found in solitude. This is the stage where you finally stop apologizing for needing what you need. You require silence, you require time to process, you require depth in every conversation, or you would rather remain silent. The world calls this antisocial. The initiated traditions call it preparation. The hermit carries the lantern, but they must first learn to keep it lit in the wind. This is what your 30s are for. And then something shifts. By your late 30s, you begin to emerge as the guardian of thresholds. You are no longer entirely in the dark, but you are not yet in the light. You stand between worlds. You begin to test your boundaries, to offer your gifts in small, controlled ways, to see what happens when you stop hiding. This is a delicate stage. You are practicing wielding power without the armor of invisibility. You are learning to be seen without being destroyed by the seeing. The guardian of thresholds helps others cross from one state to another, from ignorance to knowing, from despair to hope, whilst remaining on the edge themselves. You are not yet ready to proclaim your full capacity, but you are no longer willing to pretend you have none. Then, if you have survived all of this, if you have completed the initiatory cycle, you finally step into the archetype you are always moving towards, the seer. This usually occurs after 35, sometimes after 40, sometimes later still, depending on the intensity of the required preparation. The seer is the one who perceives what others cannot, and finally has the wisdom and the grounded presence to speak it in ways that can be heard. You are no longer Cassandra, cursed to know and not be believed. You have learned to translate your sight into language that the world can receive. You have developed the authority, resilience, and self-knowledge required to hold your gift without being overwhelmed by it. This is why you peak later. Not because you are slow, but because you were being forged into something that could survive the voltage of your own capacity. Throughout this entire journey, two other archetypes move with you. The shapeshifter is the part of you that has learned to adapt, to speak different languages in different contexts, to wear the masks required for survival without losing yourself beneath them. This is not deception. This is the exhausting work of translation that INFJs perform constantly. And the seeker is the part that has never stopped asking why, never stopped searching for the deeper pattern, never stopped believing that somewhere there is a calling that will make sense of everything. The seeker's refusal to settle is what kept you from committing to the wrong life too early. The seeker's hunger is what drives you even now. The druids understood what modern culture has forgotten. Certain trees grow slowly, root deeply, and outlive empires. Oak and elder were sacred not because they sprouted quickly, but because they could withstand storms that toppled everything around them. You have not been failing. You have been rooting in a way that will allow you to stand when the winds come, and the winds are coming. The world is entering an age where the skills of the early sprinters, rote memorization, following orders, and basic competence are becoming obsolete. The skills of the late bloomer, deep pattern recognition, complex emotional synthesis, spiritual resilience, and the ability to hold paradox are becoming the most valuable currency on the planet. This is the moment of emergence. You are standing at the threshold between the person you were forced to be and the person you were always meant to become. The pain you feel right now, the frustration of unlived potential, is not evidence that you have missed your chance. It is the pressure of the birth canal. You are too large for the life you are currently living. The initiation is complete. What remains is the choice to step through. Jung called this moment the metanoia, the turning of the mind. It is the moment when the energy directed inward towards self-analysis and protection must turn outward toward action. The chrysalis breaks, but you must choose to break it. No one can do this for you. The world will not give you permission. Your family will not understand. Your peers will likely be confused or threatened by your sudden shift from stagnation to power. You must give yourself permission. You must trust that the 7 stages you move through were not wasted time but necessary preparation. You are not starting from scratch at 35 or 40. You are beginning with a foundation that the early achievers never built, a foundation capable of sustaining a cathedral rather than a tent. The late success of the INFJ is not a delayed version of normal achievement. It is a completely different species of power. It is success born of resilience, forged in the fires of isolation, rooted in self-knowledge that cannot be taken away, because the world did not give it. It was won by you, alone, in the dark. When you finally step into your full capacity, you will not move with the frantic energy of someone trying to prove themselves. You will move with the gravitational presence of someone who has already survived their worst days and discovered they are unbreakable. This authority cannot be faked. It cannot be learned from a book. It can only be earned through initiation. The world is filled with people who can maintain the status quo. It is filled with people who peaked at 25 and have been repeating themselves ever since. But when the old systems break, when the maps no longer work, when a crisis of meaning hits the collective, that is when the early achievers crumble. Their identities were built on external validation, which can be taken away in an instant. But you have something else. You have been building a self that exists independently of the world's opinion. You have been training for the moment when everything falls apart and someone needs to stand in the center and say, I have been here before. I know the way through. This is what we explore here at Power and Myth. The INFJ experience is not a personality quirk to be managed. It is an archetypal inheritance to be claimed. If you recognize yourself in these 7 stages, if you have lived as the exile, survived as the wounded healer, descended as the hermit, emerged as the guardian, and are now standing at the threshold of becoming the seer, you are exactly where you need to be. Your timeline was never wrong. It was initiatory. Subscribe if you want to continue mapping this territory together. Tell me in the comments which archetype you are currently inhabiting. The seeker who is still searching, the hermit in the dark, the guardian, testing your first boundaries. You are not alone in this. You are part of something ancient. Until next time, find your power, know your myth,